Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. There is a moment most men can point to. Something happened, a conversation that finally went too far, a threat that felt real for the first time, a look on her face that made it impossible to keep telling yourself that things were fine. Whatever it was, it landed differently than everything before it, and something inside of you shifted. And then you got to work. You started doing more around the house. You took things off her plate without being asked. You showed up in ways that you hadn't in years. You went from doing the minimum to doing almost everything, and you felt it. You felt the effort, you felt the change, and you thought, finally, I'm being the husband that I probably should have been. And then something really confusing happened. She noticed your effort, she acknowledged it maybe, but she didn't soften in the way you expected. Or she encouraged you to slow down. Or she seemed more uncertain, not less. And you're standing there thinking, I finally do everything she's been asking for, and somehow this is still not right? If that's where you are, this episode is for you. Because what's happening isn't that you're failing again. It's that you've been solving the wrong problem. And no amount of effort in the wrong direction is going to create what you're both actually looking for. Welcome to episode 60, Why Trying Harder Isn't the Same as Changing. When something finally breaks through, a real threat, a hard conversation, a moment of genuine fear that you might lose her, most men don't pause and reflect. They mobilize. That's not a character flaw. It's actually how men are wired to respond to a problem that feels urgent. You identify the threat, you access what's wrong, and you fix it fast. The problem is that a marriage in genuine distress isn't a project. And the skills that make you effective in crisis at work, the ability to move quickly and execute decisively and show results, they don't translate to what's actually needed here. So when the wake-up call comes, most men do what they know how to do. They look at what's visibly broken and they start repairing it. They increase effort. They take on more. They try to demonstrate through action that they've heard. And on the surface, that looks like change. It registers at change. He is doing things he wasn't doing before, and that counts for something. But underneath the effort, the same patterns are usually still in place. He's still leading from anxiety. He's still trying to manage her response rather than genuinely connect with her. He's still solving for outcomes rather than showing up differently as a person in this marriage. The tasks change, but the internal experience doesn't. And she can feel that even if she can't always name it. The effort lands, but something about it just feels off. It feels urgent in a way that isn't quite comforting. It feels like a man trying very hard not to lose something, rather than a man who actually understands what went wrong. Those are different things. And they produce very different responses in the person watching. There's a specific pattern that I see often enough that I'm just going to name it. I'm going to call it flooding the zone. A man gets the wake-up call, and he goes from low engagement to high output almost overnight. Where he was doing very little before, he's now doing nearly everything. Tasks he's ignored for years suddenly get handled. Responsibilities she's carried alone are picked up without being asked. He's present, he's active, and he's visibly trying. From his perspective, this feels like finally showing up. This is what she wanted. This is the change. But here's what it looks like from her side. She has been asking for this for years. Not just help with tasks, but for partnership, for presence, for the feeling that she isn't carrying the relationship alone. And nothing moved. And then one significant moment happens, and suddenly he's everywhere, doing everything at a pace and volume that almost feels like it's about him and not her. Because it is, at least partly. The flooding is driven by fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of having waited too long. Fear that if he doesn't demonstrate change immediately and visibly, it won't be enough. That fear is real and understandable, but it's his emotional experience, not hers. And when she's on the receiving end of it, it doesn't feel like connection. It feels like pressure in a different form. There's also something else she's navigating that men rarely consider. When he suddenly takes over responsibilities she's been managing alone for years, he isn't just helping. He's entering her domain without necessarily being attuned to how she's been doing things, why she's organized them the way she has, what it means to her to have them handled in her particular way. The help can feel like a takeover. The effort can feel like it's for him, not her. And then she says something like, "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to do all of that. Go do something for yourself." And he has no idea what to do with that. When she tells him to slow down, to do something for himself, to stop trying so hard, for most men it lands like a riddle. He spent years being told directly or indirectly that he wasn't doing enough, that he was absent or disengaged and unavailable. He heard that. He felt the weight of it. And now he's doing more than he's ever done, and she's asking him to pull back? What? From his experience, this makes no sense. It can feel like nothing will ever be good enough for her. Like the goalpost moved, like she's withholding approval no matter what he does. But that reading, as understandable as it is, misses what she's actually communicating. When she says, "Do something for yourself," she isn't asking for him to disengage again. She's responding to what she feels underneath the effort. She feels his anxiety. She feels the urgency. She feels the weight of being the person whose reaction he's managing with every task he completes. And that weight is exhausting in its own way, even when the effort is genuinely helpful to her and the family. What she wants isn't more or less effort. She wants to feel him as a grounded person, not a man running from the consequences of waking up too late. She wants to see that he has an internal life that isn't entirely organized around her response. That's a sophisticated thing to feel, and it's even harder to say out loud. So it comes out as, "You don't have to do so much," or "Go do something for yourself." And he hears it as another confusing rejection of something he thought was finally right. This is one of the places where the gap between performing change and actual change becomes most visible. A man who is genuinely shifting internally doesn't need to flood the zone. He just moves differently. He shows up with less urgency and more steadiness. The effort is there, but it doesn't feel frantic. It doesn't ask her for something in return, even silently. That kind of presence doesn't come from doing more necessarily. It comes from understanding more. Here's something that most men don't fully account for when they get that wake-up call. She's been watching you for a very, very long time. Not just in the weeks since you had that hard conversation. For years. She's been tracking the distance and the shutdowns and the moments where she reached and got nothing back. She has been registering the pattern even when she didn't have language for it. Her nervous system has learned what to expect from him. And nervous systems don't update immediately based on new data. They update slowly over repeated experience when the new behavior holds over time. So when he changes his effort level in week 1, yes, she notices, but she doesn't trust it at all yet. She can't. And not because she's withholding or unkind, but because she has been through this cycle multiple times before. An apology that didn't hold. The good stretch that faded after a while. The effort that appeared in direct response to pressure and then disappeared once the pressure eased. She's not punishing him. She's waiting to see if this time is different. And here's what makes it even harder. She's probably doing her own work during this time. Therapy, maybe. Her own reflection. Conversations with other people that she trusts. And that work is clarifying things for her. She's becoming more certain about what she needs. She's developing more language for her experience, and she's changing too. Maybe just in a different direction and at a different pace for different reasons. So he's watching her become someone slightly more defined, slightly more certain of herself, and he doesn't always know if he fits in the picture that she's building. That's unsettling in a particular way that doesn't have an easy name. And the instinct is to work harder, to demonstrate more, to make sure she can see how much he's trying. But that instinct leads right back to the flooding, right back to the anxious effort that asks her to respond in a way that reassures him. What she needs to see instead isn't necessarily more volume, it's more consistency. Not a man doing 90% for a month, a man doing a genuine 60% steadily without needing immediate feedback that it's working, that she's noticing, that she appreciates it. And that's a harder thing to sustain than a quick sprint. But it's the only thing that actually builds trust over time. This is the part that's uncomfortable to sit with, but it's also the part that makes everything else make sense. Most men, when they get the wake-up call, change their behavior. They do things differently. They try harder. They show up more visibly. And they measure the success of their change by how she responds. If she softens, they conclude the change is working. If she stays guarded, they conclude the change isn't enough or isn't working, or that something is fundamentally broken. But that framework keeps him in exactly the same position he's always been in, using her response as the primary measurement of whether he's okay. Genuine change doesn't work that way. Genuine change is internal first. It's a shift in how he understands his own patterns, his own defenses, his own emotional habits. It's recognizing what he reaches for when he's anxious, what he avoids when he's uncomfortable, what he does when connection feels risky, and then slowly doing something different in those moments, not because it will immediately produce a result, but because it's more honest and more guarded and more grounded than what he was doing before. That kind of change is quieter than flooding the zone. It doesn't announce itself with a sudden spike in household tasks. It shows up in the small moments. He stays in a conversation he would have previously exited. He hears something hard without defending himself immediately. He notices the urge to fix and stays present instead. He has a bad day and doesn't bring the tension home as irritability. These aren't dramatic gestures. They don't always register immediately, but they accumulate, and over time, she feels something different. Not a man trying very hard. A man who's actually different to be around. That's what she's been waiting for. Not the 90%, the presence behind it. If you've been listening to this and quietly recognizing yourself in the scramble, that recognition matters. Not because it means that what you've been doing is completely wrong, The effort you've been putting in is real. The intention behind it is real. But intention and understanding are different things. And right now, the most important thing isn't necessarily more effort. It's more honesty about what is actually driving the effort. Ask yourself, when you increased what you were doing, who were you doing it for? What were you hoping would happen? What would it mean if she didn't respond in the way you expected? Those questions aren't meant to make you feel worse. They're meant to help you locate where the real work is. Because it isn't in the task list. It isn't in the volume of what you do. It's in the quality of who you're being when you're with her. And that's something that can't be rushed. It can't be performed, and it can't be measured by whether she softens in the next 30 days. If this episode helped you see something that you hadn't quite named before, this is a real starting point. It's not the finish line, but a genuine beginning. On June 24th, I'm hosting a free 30-minute webinar called What She Stopped Saying. I'm going to show you exactly what's been missing in your marriage and what it would actually take to close that gap. This isn't a teaching webinar. Come and see what's really happening. You can register at the link in the show notes. If you'd rather talk through your specific situation one-on-one, book a 30-minute relationship clarity call with me at elisastoddard.com. We will look honestly at what's been happening and what would actually need to change, and you will leave with far more clarity than you came in with. Take care. We'll see you next week. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.